How's it going, everybody? Porky here, and welcome to the first episode in our Bukkit coding series. I'm going to teach you essentially how to make plugins for Minecraft servers, just like you've probably used if you've ever ran a server, so like Essentials, or maybe a plugin for muting people, or maybe a plugin for all sorts of different things. I mean, there's plugins for everything. We're going to be making this with Spigot, and I'm using Spigot 1.16.5. Simply because 1.17 requires a version of Java that I am too lazy to install right now. So we're going to be coding a plugin for Spigot, and I'm going to show you like start to finish. This episode we're going to just set things up, get everything ready, and then in the next episode we're going to look at commands, and then after that we're going to look at events and configuration files and things like that. So hopefully you stick along for the ride, and hopefully I can explain this in a way that's somewhat makes sense. So I've got my server set up here. It's a completely clean install. There's nothing here, nothing in the plugins folder. The world really, it's been built. I've messed around with it a little bit. There's not much on it, but there is something. I was just kind of playing around, being a little bored. And I'm not opt, so I can't actually. The weather just keeps becoming rainy, and it's really annoying. I should really do this in a desert or something. Anyway, so if you've ever ran a Minecraft server before, you've probably used plugins from other people before, like Essentials, Permission X. Maybe you ran a prison server and you're using Mine Reset Lite, or you're using Rank Up, or you're using World Guard, World Edit, things like that. Like, there's tons of plugins out there, like literally thousands. And maybe you've dabbled with the idea of wanting to make your own. Well, today I'm going to teach you how. Now, before we get started, we're going to need a couple of things. I'm going to assume you already have Java runtime environment installed, being that you can play Minecraft and run a server. However, what we need is the Java development kit, which is this right here, the Java SE development kit. And this basically gives you the tools that you need in order to code Java. Now, when you have this, technically you could write your code in Notepad. I would 100% advise against it. That sounds like a terrible idea and sounds like it will waste so much time, but it is possible. We're not going to do that, though. We're not insane. So we're using an IDE, which is an integrated development environment, and in this case, Eclipse. Now, there is a big debate between if Eclipse is good or not. I've been using it for a long time, and I enjoy it. I learned originally on Eclipse, and it's what I still use today, although a lot of people have said that IntelliJ is the superior IDE, and that if you use Eclipse, then you're kind of insane and don't know what you're doing, and yada yada yada. The differences are minor, and if you're doing this as like a little hobby, or you're just developing for Minecraft servers, it's really not going to be that big of a deal which one you use. Once you start getting into really complex code and like maybe professional environments for your development, maybe it'd be a good idea to switch over to IntelliJ, but for right now, Eclipse works just fine for us. It's simple, easy to use, and it's what I have been using. So once you got those two things, then you can just open up Eclipse, and you should see something like this, just really blank. On the left here, you've got your Package Explorer. This is where all your projects are going to show up. And then on the right here, this is where you're actually going to write the code when you have a file open. So obviously, I think the first thing you probably guessed that we're going to do is we're going to create a Java project. And most of these settings are not going to matter to you. Pretty much all of them. Again, if you're doing more advanced stuff, this might matter for you, but in our case, it does not. We're just going to name our project real quick, and I'm just going to call it Course Plugin, because I'm really tired of seeing the word tutorial, so I chose Course instead. And we're just going to hit Finish here. Now on the left side in the Package Explorer, you're going to see our project appear, and you can hit the little arrow here to see what's inside of it. We've got the JRE, the Java Runtime Environment System Library, And this stuff you're never really going to have to touch, but it is there. And then your source folder, which is where all your code is going to go. Now, before we actually get started, we are going to need to import Bukkit or Spigot or whatever you want to call it. Basically, the software that runs our server here, which is running right here. Now, Spigot is based off of Bukkit, so that's why I'm going to refer to it as Bukkit. Bukkit doesn't really exist anymore, but Spigot has taken its place. And so this server here, not only does it run the server, but it also has all of the tools that we need in order to develop Minecraft plugins. So I'm going to right click on course plugin. I'm going to go down to properties at the very bottom here. And then on the left side here, if it's not already selected, click on Java build path and then go to libraries tab at the top. We're going to add an external jar, and we're going to add our spigot.jar, whatever the jar is that is running the server that we want to develop for. We're going to click open, and then once you see it on the list here, just hit apply and close, and you're going to see a new little thing pop up here, referenced libraries. That's exactly what we want to see. Perfect. And now we can actually get started. So I'm going to right click on the source folder here because we got to create a new file. We got to actually write some code. So I'm going to right click on it, go to new, and then class. Now class is kind of the basic file for all Java code. It's where all of your code is going to go in. It's in a class. There is other ones like interfaces and enums, but those are for a later time. They're a little more advanced than what we need right now. So we're just going to create a new class, and then you're going to have this window here. And again, most of this isn't going to really matter for you. The source folder should be, your plugin in the source folder. Now, we're going to give it a name, and I'm just going to call this course plugin because it seems like what's very common is that the main class of your plugin is always just the same name as the plugin. It doesn't have to be, but it often is. Now, you're also going to want to set a package for it. You could just put it straight into the source folder, but that's really ugly and messy. So we want to put it in a package, which is essentially like folders in a project. Now, our package is going to have a weird looking name, and you're going to figure this out as you go. If you've never coded for Java before, Java has a lot of what's called naming conventions, which is basically just a format that you use to name things. Do you have to follow them? Technically, no. But in order to, keep things organized and simple, and is it raining again? Oh my goodness. I'm turning off sound for this guy. In order to keep things organized and simple, we are going to follow the naming conventions. And for packages, it is strange. So the package naming convention is essentially your domain name backwards. So, for example, if you had google.com, right, you would write your package name as com.google and then .course plugin, for example. And essentially the idea behind it is we're going from the most broad identifier to the most specific. And so .com is used by tons of different websites. So google.com, facebook.com, youtube.com, the list goes on. So that's the most broad one. Now, of the .coms, we're looking for Google. And that's going to narrow us down quite a bit. And then within Google, I said that weird. Within Google, we're going to look for course plugin. So it's just getting more and more specific after every dot. Obviously, we're not going to use google.com. And if you don't have your own domain, don't worry. A lot of people I've seen use me dot and then porkydev.course plugin, just like that. I've seen that used a lot for people who don't actually have domain names. They put me dot their name or their username dot the plugin itself. It doesn't really matter that much. It really doesn't matter that much, but it is good to follow it just to keep things organized and a little bit professional. We're going to make sure we have this checkbox here checked, although I guess for the main class it actually doesn't matter because there's not really any inherited methods for this class. So whatever, we're going to just ignore that. We might use that for other classes in the future though. So we're just going to hit finish now. We've set the package, we've set the name, everything else here, not really an issue for our main class. We're going to hit finish and it's going to create our course plugin.java over here. And then on the right side here, we've got 5 lines of code that it has automatically generated for us. The first one is the package, telling where this class file is. And then 3 through 5 are the class itself. Public class course plugin, and then in brackets here is where all of your code is going to go for this class file. Now, in order to create this as a plugin, in order to make this a plugin for Bukkit, we're going to, right after public class course plugin, we're going to do extends Java plugin, just like that. And then it's going to underline in red, hover over it, and it's going to say, do you want to import this? And yes, we do, from org.bukkit.plugin.java. So now that we've imported that, it is all good. It knows that this is a plugin. We're going to be using Bukkit's code in this, and it's going to run as a plugin. So now that we've gotten that done, we can actually start writing some code. So when you create the main class of your plugin, and the main class is just whichever one extends Java plugin, whenever you create the main class, there is a couple of methods that you should or need to create right off of the bat. The first is public void on enable, like that, with the little parentheses there as well. And then the second one is public void on disable, like that. So this is probably self-explanatory. Whatever code is in here will be run as soon as the plugin is loaded, and whatever code is in here will be run as soon as the plugin is unloaded. So it's pretty simple, but you need these two in order to get your plugin to like function. Like on enable is a bit more important than on disable. This is more for plugins that need to like save configuration files and things like that. But on enable, it's still useful, and we're still just going to put it here because we're going to need it eventually in the future. But on enable is where most important things are going to go. Now in the on enable here, we can make it do something when the plugin is enabled. So if we type Bukkit and then press dot, you're going to see a list come up, and it just gives you so many of the tools that Bukkit has to offer. There is an incredible amount of things you can do here. You can add a recipe, you can ban an IP, you can broadcast a message, you can create a world, you can get the list of banned players, you can get the IP of the server, you can get a player, you can, check if the server is hardcore, reset the recipes, save the players, unban an IP. There is so much that you can do in this, set the whitelist, etc., etc. The one that we're looking for here is get logger, which is this one right here. And if we typed it, it would show up there as we typed it. Bukkit.getLogger, and that's essentially the logger is the system that runs all of the messages you see here in the console. And then we're gonna do .info like that, and it requires a string. So in here we're gonna put some quotations, and we're gonna say course plugin has been enabled, just like that. Sorry, I've got I got a new keyboard, and my fingers just kind of go all over the place on it. Not used to typing on it yet. So course plugin has been enabled. This is in the info, so it's going to create one of these lines of info here. You see how these say info? There's also warning, and there's also severe and things like that. But we are just using info because that's what pretty much everything uses. Unless we're actually like saying there's an error in the console, then you can use warning or severe or whatever, but we're just using info for this. So now that that is set up there, when we load the plugin, it will say to the console, course plugin has been enabled. And I'm just going to add a little smiley face on here, just so that we know that we wrote this message when it shows up. Technically, that will run. This will run as a plugin. It won't do much. It'll just say to the console that the course plugin has been enabled, and that's it. But it will run as a plugin. However, there is one piece of the puzzle that we are still missing that we need to include here, and that is what's called a plugin.yml. And whenever a Bukkit plugin runs, it requires this plugin.yml in order to give the server some information about your plugin. So the plugin.yml has a lot of different parameters that you can use in it. And I guess before I get into this, I should just create it. We're going to right click on our source folder here. We're going to go new file, and we're just going to name it plugin.yml like that. Now it's going to open whatever your text editor is on your computer. For me, it's Visual Studio Code. And then in here, we can create the plugin.yml. So the plugin.yml has a lot of different attributes. There's 3 that are required, and that's main, name, and version. But then there's a lot of optional as well. You can add a description. You can add an API version. You can say when the plugin should be loaded. You could write who's the author of the plugin, or add multiple authors. A website for your plugin, any dependencies your plugin has, the prefix when logging plugin messages to the console, soft depends, which is different than depends, and it's a little complicated. I'll explain that at a later date. And then other things, the commands go in here, any permissions the plugin wants to register goes in here. This is part of the commands. Yeah, okay. So yeah, this is how complicated your plugin YML can look, but we don't need it to look this complicated. For this example, we're just going to add what is required for now. I mean, soon we're going to add things that are not required, but we're going to just start with what's required here. So first off, we're going to do main. That's the first thing that's required, and that is essentially telling Bukkit where your main class is in your plugin. So for us, it's me.porkydev.courseplugin.courseplugin. And so we're writing the package here, me.porkydev.courseplugin right there, and then we're writing the class course plugin right there. This is case sensitive, so make sure if your class name has capital letters, you put them in here. Next, we're going to put the name, and this is just called course plugin. It's just the name of your plugin. And then version, this is just 1.0. Doesn't really matter, but this is version 1.0 of the plugin. Save that and close it and hush Eclipse, and we're all good. Now we can actually export this plugin. Oh, I guess I should explain this. Right click, export. Make sure you've got under Java, click jar file. Next, and then you get to choose where you export it to. For me, it says stupid plugin. That's not what I want. I want course plugin. Oh, I already wrote plugin. Course plugin, and then hit finish, and it will export. And now, oh my goodness, it's raining again. We don't need to do anything in game because we didn't actually set up anything to happen in game. The weather clear, please clear the weather. Like, stop letting it rain. Is that a game rule? Game rule, do weather cycle false. Please stop giving me rain. Okay, sorry. We're gonna reload the server real quick, and we should see our plugin load in here somewhere. There it is. Course plugin has been enabled with the smiley face, so we know that we wrote that because we put it right here. So the plugin loaded. It gave us an info message. Course plugin has been enabled. Smiley face. Perfect. And here's a warning right there. Like I said, there are different types of messages: warning, warning, and then info, and then severe, and things like that. So, yeah, we just created our first plugin. It doesn't really do much other than say that the plugin is loaded, but we're going to expand on this in the next episode where we're actually going to write our first command. So stick around for that. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you found this useful, and I will see you in the next episode. Goodbye.